The call reached Kang Seo in the middle of a boardroom takeover. Not from a rival, not from the police, from his mother's chief housekeeper. Her voice was calm, which made it worse. "Chairman Kang," she said, "Madam requests your immediate presence, and, sir, it concerns your bloodline." The room went silent. Seo, the man Seoul's shadow market obeyed without a second warning, left 20 executives frozen around a glass table and drove straight to his mother's mansion in Hanam-dong. He expected another lecture, another strategic ambush disguised as tea. Instead, the moment he opened the carved walnut door to her private west wing, he heard a newborn cry. Then another, then a third. He stopped so suddenly, even the bodyguards behind him nearly collided with his back. 3 cries. 3. And standing beside 3 ivory cribs under the afternoon light was the woman he had erased from his life 9 months ago, his ex-wife, Amara Johnson. She didn't flinch, didn't rush to explain, didn't even look surprised. Madam Kang Hua-young set down her teacup and delivered the sentence that split his world in half. "You deported her," she said. "So I hid your heirs." 9 months. His wife had vanished 9 months ago. 3 infants. The math was merciless. If you love high-stakes romance, betrayal, and justice that arrives with perfect timing, stay with me, because this story begins cold and only gets more dangerous from here. Seo looked from Amara's face to the baby's tiny, clenched fists. Only one question mattered. How had his children been born under his own family's roof without him knowing? Kang Seo had walked into negotiation rooms with ministers, prosecutors, hedge fund sharks, and men whose smiles were more lethal than knives. He had never once felt unsteady. But in his mother's west wing, his balance left him. The room smelled faintly of warm milk, linen, and sandalwood polish. A mobile turned above one crib, small silver cranes glinting in the light. The babies were impossibly small, impossibly real. One stirred, one yawned. One blinked up at the ceiling as if unaware that his existence had just cracked open an empire. Seo's gaze dragged back to Amara. 9 months had changed her in ways words could barely hold. She was slimmer in the face, stronger in the spine, quieter in a way that felt almost dangerous. No glossy social wife softness, no effort to please. No trace of the woman who once waited for the sound of his footsteps past midnight. She wore a simple cream blouse, dark slacks, her hair neatly wrapped back, a gold cross at her throat, and an onyx pendant resting just beneath it. The pendant, his gift. His chest tightened once, hard. "Whose children?" he asked, though the answer was already inside him, sharp as poison. Madam Kang's eyes turned glacial. "If you insult me with that question again, Seo, I will answer it in front of your board." Amara finally spoke. Her voice was calm enough to humiliate him. "You don't get to sound betrayed." That landed harder than a slap ever could. Behind him, his chief of security shifted. Seo lifted one finger without turning around. Everyone left. The doors closed. Silence deepened. Then one of the babies whimpered. And for the first time in years, Kang Seo did not know where to put his hands. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that, in this room, no one looked afraid of him. Madam Kang Hua-young did not raise her voice. She never needed to. She motioned to the seat across from her low tea table, like a judge allowing a defendant one final chance at dignity. Seo remained standing. "Sit," she said. He sat. Amara stayed by the cribs. Not behind him, not beside him, beyond him. That geometry said everything. His mother poured tea for herself, for Amara, and after a brief pause, for her son. The omission would have been easier. The inclusion was worse. It meant he was being handled. "I'll ask once," he said. "When were they born?" 3 weeks ago, Amara replied. 3 weeks. 3 weeks while his intelligence teams tracked hostile investors, bribed customs officials, moved millions through clean fronts, and fortified political alliances. His own children had been breathing under his mother's roof. His jaw hardened. "Why was I not told?" Madame Kong set down her cup. "Because when Amara needed to be believed, you chose convenience." His mind snapped to Incheon Airport. Cold lighting, polished floors. Seo Yan's hand on his sleeve. Amara standing alone with 2 security officers and an immigration supervisor. Paperwork he signed too quickly because the scandal risk felt too loud. He had told himself he was containing chaos. He had told himself he would fix it later. But later had become 3 children. Amara crossed one arm over herself. "I contacted the only person in your world whose loyalty wasn't for sale." His head turned sharply toward his mother. The old woman's expression did not shift. "The pendant had an emergency code. I had it embedded years ago for family women. Apparently, I trusted my son's judgment less than I realized." A brutal, elegant truth. The most powerful man in Seoul's hidden economy had not been defeated by a rival family. He had been outmaneuvered by foresight. Jun Seo looked back at Amara. "You came to her, not to me." She met his eyes without blinking. "You had already answered me." And just like that, everything flipped from shock to accusation. At Incheon, the glass walls had reflected everyone too clearly. Amara remembered that first. The sharp airport lighting, the rolling wheels of suitcases, the sterile scent of overfiltered air, the quiet thrill of cruelty dressed as procedure. She had been wearing a navy coat and the wedding ring she would not keep by the end of the hour. Across from her stood Seo Yan in pearl earrings and a pale coat that made her look harmless. She was not harmless. She never had been. She stood slightly behind Jun Seo with the poise of a woman who understood camera angles, witness psychology, and male pride. The immigration supervisor had spoken with overly respectful caution. "Mrs. Kang, there are unresolved documentation concerns related to your residency designation and potential risk classification." Risk classification. Amara had stared at him. "Based on what?" Seo Yan answered before the official could. "There are rumors linking foreign spouses to asset exposure. I'm sure it's just precaution." That smile. Smooth, professional, deadly. Jun Seo's phone had been vibrating nonstop. News of a prosecutor reopening a financial shell investigation, a shareholder revolt, a rival family probing his compliance channels. Too many fires, too much noise. Amara had looked only at him. "Jun Seo, listen to me." He should have. Instead, he saw delay, headlines, weakness. He signed the temporary removal clearance that would allow review without spectacle. Without spectacle. As if humiliation became moral when it was efficient. Amara's face had gone still in a way he did not understand then. No tears. No pleading. Just stillness. She removed her ring and pressed it into his palm. For 1 second, his fingers closed around it out of instinct, not choice. "You don't have to love me," she had said softly. "But one day you'll understand what you threw away." Then she turned and walked toward the gate with her back straight and her silence colder than any curse. Seo Yan had exhaled as if a problem had been solved. Seo told himself he would bring Amara back after the pressure cooled. He never got the chance, because while he delayed, someone else was already writing the next chapter. Amara discovered the pregnancy in a clinic in Atlanta 2 weeks after landing, alone except for a church friend of her aunt's, who didn't ask questions she could not answer. She had expected exhaustion, stress, maybe illness, not this. The ultrasound technician frowned, then smiled in disbelief. "Honey, there's more than one." Amara turned her head. The screen was gray, blurred, unreal. The technician counted again. "3." "3." For a moment, the room lost shape. The paper beneath her hands crackled. Her throat tightened around a laugh that became a sob she refused to let out. 3 babies, not one hidden truth. 3 living liabilities in the world Kang Junseo ruled. Because she knew that world now. She knew how families like his spoke about heirs, not as children first, but as succession, leverage, legitimacy, insurance. She knew how enemies watched bloodlines. She knew how allies priced them. On the bus ride back, rain crawled down the window in thin silver trails. She pressed her fingers against her stomach and understood 2 things at once. She could never tell him. And she still hated that part of her that wished he had chosen differently. That night, she opened the small velvet box in her suitcase. Inside was the onyx pendant he had given her 2 winters earlier after a threat scare in Itaewon. "For protection," he had said. At the time, she thought it was his version of tenderness. Expensive, controlled, indirect. Now, turning it over in lamplight, she noticed the near-invisible seam at the back. Inside, a tiny code strip. Not romantic, strategic. And suddenly, she wondered if someone in that family had prepared for this kind of disaster long before she had. Madame Kang did not answer the first message. She answered the second. Amara had sent only 6 words through the secure relay embedded in the pendant system. "I am pregnant. I am unsafe." The response arrived 16 minutes later from an encrypted number. Location, doctor, no one else. That was all. No sympathy, no dramatic concern, just movement. 2 days later, a Korean legal consultant posing as a medical liaison visited Amara's apartment. The paperwork was flawless. So was the cover story. Within a week, a private foundation linked to cultural exchange sponsorship arranged specialized maternal care, temporary residence restructuring, and quiet transportation under a different name. When Madame Kang finally appeared in person, it was not in Seoul, but in a discreet women's health residence outside Savannah, where even the security cameras looked bored. She entered in a charcoal hanbok coat, diamond pin at the collar, posture sharpened by decades of surviving men who confused money with intelligence. Amara stood awkwardly, tired and furious and ashamed of none of it. Madame Kang looked her over once. "You lost weight. I lost a country. That too." For a strange second, Amara almost laughed. The older woman sat. "My son is a capable man. Capability without moral interruption becomes arrogance. Arrogance creates blind spots. You are currently living inside one of his." Amara folded her hands to stop them from shaking. "Why help me?" Madame Kang's answer came without delay. Because my son's sins do not have the right to erase my grandchildren. Not my bloodline first, my grandchildren. The wording mattered. Then came the conditions. Hidden return to Korea, medical supervision, no digital trail, no contact with Jun Seo until safety protocols were complete. Publicly, Amara would remain gone. Privately, the babies would be born in the only place powerful enough to refuse outside hands, Madame Kang's house. Amara stared at her. "You're asking me to trust the family that threw me out." "I am asking you," Madame Kang said, "to distinguish between a family and one man's failure." That was the first door that opened. And yet, even then, neither woman understood how close the enemy already was. While Amara disappeared, Seo Yan rose. Not publicly. She was too disciplined for that. Publicly, she remained elegant, charitable, positioned near Kang Group cultural foundations and high society dinners without ever demanding title or announcement. Privately, she was always 2 steps closer. She learned when Jun Seo preferred silence over music, which ministers responded to flattery, which board member had a gambling son, which reporter accepted exclusive leaks wrapped in moral concern. She never asked for obvious things. She asked for access, context, timing. And Jun Seo, bruised by pressure and increasingly allergic to emotional complication, allowed it. She became useful. Useful is one of the most dangerous words a lonely, powerful man can attach to a woman he does not truly know. She reviewed event lists, flagged reputational liabilities, suggested which old family allies were disloyal, nudged him away from messy domestic optics whenever Amara's name threatened to resurface through gossip columns or foreign embassy chatter. Once, late at night in his office overlooking the Han River, she placed tea near his hand and said lightly, "Some relationships are too soft for your world. You need someone who understands structure." He didn't answer, but he did not correct her either, and that silence became permission. Seo Yan smiled rarely. When she did, it looked like restraint. In truth, it was calculation. She wasn't trying to replace Amara in his heart. She was trying to restructure the life around him so thoroughly that the missing wife would no longer have a door left to return through. In the present, Seo Yan arrived at Madame Kang's estate 17 minutes after Jun Seo's car. That alone told Amara everything. She was monitoring him. The gates opened only after Madame Kang's direct approval, and even then the house staff did not hurry. The slight delay was deliberate, aristocratic, punishing. Seoul's elite understood etiquette as warfare with better tailoring. Amara stood near the nursery threshold, holding one of the babies, little Min Jun, the fussiest of the 3, while Madame Kang remained seated like a queen in private court. Jun Seo stood near the window, his expression restored to a cold neutrality so precise it looked painful. Seo Yan entered with measured concern already arranged on her face. "I heard there was a family emergency." Madame Kang did not invite her to sit. Seo Yan's eyes found the cribs. For one fraction of a second, the mask slipped. Not jealousy, alarm. Then she recovered. "I see." Amara noticed that. She noticed everything now. Jun Seo said, "You shouldn't have come." A tiny sentence, a tiny crack. Seo Yan stepped closer. "I came because people are talking. Your schedule collapsed, security shifted, your mother locked down the West Wing. If there's a threat, I need to know." Madame Kang's gaze sharpened. You need many things beyond your rank." Seo Yan ignored the insult and looked straight at Amara. "You hid children from their father." Amara adjusted Min Jun against her shoulder. "Your concern is touching." "I'm serious," Seo Yan said, voice tightening. "This looks like entrapment." There it was, the first narrative strike. But this time, Amara did not stand alone in an airport surrounded by paperwork and male impatience. This time, the house itself chose its side. Madame Kong rose. "In my home, facts arrive before accusations. You may begin practicing that discipline now." And if Seo Yan expected the older woman to remain neutral, she had just made her worst miscalculation yet. Madame Kang believed order was kinder than chaos. So before anyone could start another war with words, she established terms. "The children will remain here under my protection," she said. "Staff access is restricted. Medical records are sealed. No photographs, no press movement, no registry exposure without legal preparation." Then she turned to Jun Seo. "You will not touch those babies today." His eyes flicked to hers, sharp, offended, disbelieving. She did not blink. "You forfeited assumption of trust," she continued. "From this moment, access is earned, not inherited." Amara said nothing, but the truth of that settled into the room like stone. Seo Yan laughed once under her breath. "This is absurd." Madame Kong didn't even look at her. "And you will have no further presence in this house." Seo Yan's posture stiffened. "On what basis?" "On the basis," Madame Kong said, finally turning toward her, "that my instincts are excellent." Jun Seo stepped in before the clash sharpened. "Mother." "No, you will listen now." Her voice remained perfectly controlled. "Phase 1 is simple. Supervised access only. Limited information. No decisions, no claims. If Amara agrees, you may observe your children tomorrow for 15 minutes. Observe. Not father. Not hold. Not name. Observe." Humiliation flashed across his face and vanished almost instantly. Amara saw it anyway. Then Madame Kang added the real blade. "Your first condition is this. End all private contact with Yoon Seo Yan until I complete my review." The room changed temperature. Seo Yan's head turned toward Jun Seo. "You're entertaining this?" Amara looked at him too. There it was. Not love, not reconciliation. A test. The kind that asks a powerful man what he will sacrifice when no audience can reward him for it. Jun Seo spoke without softness. "Leave, Seo Yan." This was not redemption, but it was the first correct move. That night, Seoul glittered under thin rain, all mirrored towers and wet black streets. But Jun Seo barely saw any of it. He sat alone in his penthouse study with the signed airport clearance laid on the desk before him, like evidence at trial. Beside it sat Amara's wedding ring. He had kept it, hidden, but kept. He poured whiskey and didn't drink it. On one screen, his investigators compiled domestic threat maps around the estate. On another, legal counsel drafted emergency trust structures for unregistered heirs. He issued 13 orders in 20 minutes. No leaks. Freeze peripheral staff. Audit Seo Yan's access history. Pull airport records. Identify who initiated the foreign spouse security complaint. Efficient, fast, controlled. And still none of it changed the sound of those three cries. His fixer, Han Dae-sik, stood near the door. "Should I assign internal surveillance to Madam's residence?" "No," Seo said. "Any move around her house happens with my approval only." Sik hesitated. "That's unlike you." "I know." The room went quiet again. Finally, Seo asked, "Did Amara ever try to contact me after Atlanta?" Sik's pause was answer enough. "Once," he admitted. "A message request came through an old diplomatic intermediary. It was flagged during the prosecutor crisis. Seo Yan said it was emotional manipulation." Something in Seo's face changed. Small, lethal. "She intercepted it?" "She advised delay." Advised delay. He turned the wedding ring in his fingers. Cold metal. Simple band. A life narrowed into weight. "Find the message," he said. As Sik left, Seo leaned back and stared at the city he had bent to his will for years. Suddenly, it looked less like a kingdom and more like a machine that had taught him to confuse decisiveness with truth. But the real punishment hadn't arrived yet, because tomorrow he would see his children, and they would not know his face. The next morning, Madame Kang timed him herself. No entourage, no phone, no watch, no gun, no lawyers. Seo entered the nursery in a plain dark sweater instead of a suit, which should not have mattered, and somehow did. Amara was already there, seated in a low chair with one baby asleep against her chest, while the other two rested side by side, wrapped in soft muslin. Madame Kang stood by the door. 15 minutes. Seo approached carefully, as if any sudden movement might shatter the air. Up close, the babies were even more devastating. Tiny mouths, silk dark hair, hands no bigger than folded petals. "Names?" he asked. Amara answered after a beat. "Grace, Minjun, Jiho." He swallowed. "You named one in English, two in Korean." "She belongs to all of me," Amara said. "So do they." There was no aggression in it, only fact. He crouched slightly, not touching, just looking. Minjun opened his eyes, unfocused and serious in that strange, newborn way, and Seo froze. A ridiculous thought hit him. The child had his eyebrows. It should not have undone him. It did. Amara noticed the shift and looked away, maybe to protect herself, maybe because she could not bear the sincerity of delayed grief. "Were you alone?" he asked quietly. "Not entirely." "During the birth?" "No." "During the pregnancy?" "That took longer. Mostly." The honesty hurt more than accusation would have. Grace stirred and made a soft, protesting sound. Without thinking, Seo reached out, then stopped himself inches from the crib rail. Madame Kang's rule held him like iron. Amara saw that too. For a second, something unreadable crossed her face. Not pity, not forgiveness. Recognition. This man, who could command prosecutors and destroy companies before lunch, was being defeated by a distance of 6 inches. Later that afternoon, Amara requested a private meeting in Madame Kang's library. Private, but not secret. The older woman remained nearby, visible through the half-open sliding doors as both witness and warning. Rain tapped the window panes. Shelves of old Korean legal volumes and family ledgers lined the walls. The room smelled of tea leaf and cedar. Seo remained standing until Amara sat first. That was new. She placed a folder on the table between them. "These are my terms." He looked at the folder, then at her. "You prepared documents overnight?" I had 9 months. Fair. He opened it. Legal guardianship structure. Security guidelines. Emergency medical authority. Conditions for phased paternal access. Very specific conditions. She pointed without dramatics. If you want phase 2, you do 3 things. First, permanent severance from Seo Yan in writing and in practice. Second, independent forensic review of the airport case and all communication tampering. Third, legal recognition that the children cannot be used in succession politics, media optics, or power negotiations without my consent, and Madam Kang's joint oversight. He read every page. "This limits me," he said. "Yes." "You don't trust me." "No." The bluntness should have angered him. Instead, it felt deserved. He closed the folder. "And if I refuse?" "Then you remain a biological fact with visiting privileges." There it was. No emotional blackmail, no dramatic pleading, just rules. Jun Seo leaned back slightly. "What do you want from me, really?" Amara's answer came soft and clean. "Consistency. You confuse possession with protection. My children will not." My children. Not our children. Not yet. Before he could respond, she added, "And one more thing. If you ever force a choice between your image and their safety again, you lose all access permanently." The line hit the center of him because it named his original sin exactly. Would you trust a man who failed you once if he came back, changed too late? Think about that, because Amara's next decision depends on the kind of wound you believe can heal. Jun Seo signed the first page, then the second. Phase 2 had a door now, but someone outside the house was already trying to lock it. Seo Yan did not scream, threaten, or beg. Women like her never wasted emotion when information could do more damage. Within 48 hours of being cut off, a small but influential financial blog published a blind item about an unregistered foreign ex-spouse, secretly re-entering the country under protection, tied to a major Seoul conglomerate. No names, but enough details to make the right enemies curious. Jun Seo read the report in his car and felt his pulse harden. "Source?" he asked. Dasik answered from the front. The blog receives tips through a shell public relations firm. One of the firm's consultants did event work for Seo Yan last year. Of course. At Madam Kang's house, security tightened immediately. Deliveries rerouted. Staff devices collected. The nursery moved from the west wing to a more interior suite with no external sightline. Amara watched the logistics unfold with terrifying calm. This was exactly what she had feared. Once the children existed in rumor, they became leverage in other people's equations. Jun Seo arrived before dusk. "You were right," he said, without preamble. She folded a blanket with precise hands. "About?" "That hesitation is danger." It was the closest thing to an apology he had managed so far. She nodded once. "What's your response?" "Not force, containment." He laid out the plan. Trace the leak backward through payments, expose a competing scandal elsewhere to draw media interest off the family, and use clean legal pressure on the PR firm rather than shadow retaliation. Amara studied him. Why not crush them? Because crushed people make noise. Cornered people sell stories. That answer impressed her more than intimidation would have. Madam Kang entered midway through the discussion and listened in silence. When Jun Seo finished, she said, "Good. At least fatherhood is making you less lazy. It should have been insulting. Instead, it was the first approval he'd earned in years. And yet, the deeper leak still hadn't surfaced, because Seo Yan wasn't acting alone. The recovered message reached Seo at 2:14 in the morning. Dasik placed a printed copy on his desk because some things deserved paperweight. It was short. I know you made your choice. I won't ask you to reverse it, but there is something you need to hear from me directly, not through anyone else. Please speak to me once before it becomes impossible. Amara, timestamp. The day after her ultrasound appointment. Intercepted, delayed, buried. Seo read it 3 times. Not because it was complicated, because it was not. There was no manipulation in it, no rage, no desperate plea, only one request to be heard, and he had denied even that. He drove to Madame Kang's estate before sunrise, dismissed the guards himself, and asked Amara for 5 minutes in the courtyard garden. Autumn wind moved through the pines. The stone path was still damp. She came out wrapped in a cream cardigan, hair loose, expression guarded. He handed her the message. I saw it tonight. She didn't take the paper. She didn't need to. She recognized her own words instantly. Yes, she said. His throat tightened around a truth he had never said out loud. I made being efficient more important than being honest. Amara's eyes didn't soften, but they sharpened with attention. He continued, voice lower now. I thought delay was temporary. I thought I could control fallout and repair damage later. That is how I've handled everything for years. I turned that habit on my marriage, on you. There it was, the flaw, named cleanly. No excuses, no blaming pressure, no blaming Seo Yan. For a long second, only wind moved between them. Then Amara asked the question that mattered most. And when you realized you'd been lied to? He met her gaze. I was angry, but not because I was deceived, because I saw how easily I wanted to be deceived if the lie made my life simpler. That confession changed something. Not forgiveness, but truth had finally entered the conversation without armor. Amara took the paper from his hand. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. He exhaled once, barely. Then she added, don't make me regret that. Phase 2 looked small from the outside. It was not small. Seo was allowed 1 supervised hour each morning and 1 each evening. He could hold the babies if Amara or Madame Kang handed them to him first. He could attend pediatric consultations. He could review security plans but not override them. He could not take photographs for private use. He could not introduce the children to extended business allies. He could not sleep at the estate. Every limit mattered. The first time Grace was placed in his arms, his entire body changed. He took her carefully, like a man holding evidence that life had once trusted him and might, under impossible conditions, do so again. Grace's fist opened against his sweater and closed on nothing. Seo stared down at her with a concentration that made Amara suddenly look away. He was good at learning. That had always been true. Within days, he knew which lullaby tone settled Jiho faster, how Min-jun hated cold wipes, how Grace liked rhythmic pacing over stillness. No one said it, but all 3 babies responded to his voice. That was dangerous too, because attachment always raises the stakes. One evening, as sunset stained the nursery curtains amber, Amara entered to find Seo standing by the crib, murmuring in soft Korean to Jiho about traffic on the river bridge, as if giving a newborn market updates was perfectly reasonable. She almost smiled. Almost. He noticed. What? Nothing. Say it. You sound absurdly gentle. He looked at Jaiho, not her. He seems to prefer it. That answer settled somewhere beneath her ribs. But before tenderness could grow into comfort, Madame Kang interrupted with urgent news. A private investigator hired by an unnamed party had been seen asking questions about foreign birth records and emergency maternal transport. Someone was tracing the pregnancy backward, and the person behind it knew more than they should. The first family meal happened 3 days later, and it was more dangerous than any boardroom. Not because of enemies, because of tradition. Madame Kang hosted a small breakfast in the ancestral dining room, the one reserved for family transitions and private rites. Low flower arrangements, porcelain bowls, silver chopsticks aligned with military precision. The babies remained upstairs with nurses, but their presence hovered over every seat. Amara paused at the threshold in a soft jade dress, aware, as always, of the room's history before it welcomed her. Years earlier, some older relatives had treated her like an elegant disruption. Too foreign, too visible, too difficult to categorize in their quiet hierarchy of blood and marriage. Today, Madame Kang ended that ambiguity with one sentence. Amara, sit at the right side of the family table. Not guest placement, not tolerated placement, family placement. Two elderly aunts exchanged a glance they were too well trained to make obvious. Madame Kang ignored them so completely it became a warning.